we finally got the Catalyst data, and the headlines out of it were as unsurprising as they were depressing. Kamala Harris lost critical ground with young voters and people of color, especially men of color, especially young men of color. In fact, she gained ground only with married white women, and not by much.
1 point.
1 point. Yeah, it's 1 point.
Yes. And it's not clear what they rounded up from to get there.
And super voters in this report, which are people who voted in the last 4 elections. She did 1 point better with Biden among the super voters, but she lost a lot of ground among the irregular voters, people who have voted in just a few of the last 4 elections. As Amy Walter and Carrie Dan at the Cook Political Report put in their headline, the main conclusion from this report is, quote, "The Obama coalition turned into the Trump coalition." Ouch.
Boy. So we got to continue our coverage of the fallout that is currently happening in the Democrat Party over the cover-up of Joe Biden. Because now you have some Democrat governors, like, for example, Josh Shapiro, who a lot of people think that he may be running for president in 2028 in a Democrat primary. He has been confronted about the fact that, allegedly, according to Jake Tapper's book, that behind closed doors, he was telling Biden that, hey, I don't think you're all that great, right? I think that you need some help, right? I'm worried about your health. But yet, in public, he was saying things a little bit differently.
Bombshell book, they say, coming out tomorrow, expected to give readers an inside look into what was really happening in the White House and the physical and mental deterioration of Joe Biden. And there's a local connection mentioned in the book. Accounts from PA Governor Josh Shapiro. CBS 21's Maxine Rose is live outside the governor's residence with some conflicting words the governor used when talking about Biden. Maxine.
Joel, the reports say that the book is going to be talking about the fact that Governor Josh Shapiro had some private conversations with former President Joe Biden after his debate performance in June of 2024. Shapiro reportedly telling the former president that he was worried about him. Now, the shocking new details come after Governor Josh Shapiro, along with a number of high-profile Democrats, had on multiple occasions defended the former president's fitness publicly up until the end of Biden's time in office. In a press conference last week, Governor Josh Shapiro answered a reporter's question about whether he felt Biden had cognitive decline while in office and if the party would have been better off without Biden running again. Take a listen.
I mean, look, I'm not going to get into, first off, I haven't read the book. I don't know what they're citing. I could tell you that I was very frank with the president during his campaign about what I saw were some of the shortcomings of his campaign. And I was very honest with him in a private setting about that.
Yeah, so this is not going away, okay? I don't know whether or not Joe Biden's team thought that this would go away by announcing that Joe Biden had cancer. But in my opinion, it's actually just made it worse, right? It's made the story blow up even more because I think it is clear and obvious that these Democrats probably hid not only the fact that Joe Biden was mentally and physically declining, but again, he had cancer, prostate cancer, something that, you know, it just so happens that Biden has joked about before in the past, okay? And we all remember Joe Biden claiming in 2022 that he had cancer, but he also claimed back in 2015 that he would get prostate cancer. Take a look.
And so he said, well, what do you want? I said, 2 things. 1, to be able to completely be level with you and argue with you if we disagree privately. And secondly, I want to be the last person in the room on every major decision. And I didn't mean it figuratively, I meant literally, to be the last person in the room. He's president. He gets to make the decision, and unless there's an overwhelming disagreement on principle, in which case I develop prostate cancer or something and leave. And he knew I meant that for a major fundamental disagreement. But there have been none, and I get to be the last person in the room, make my case to him privately, and that's where I think I could serve best.
Yeah, so again, I think this rabbit hole is probably a lot deeper than the conversations that are currently happening.
Can I check the oven?
Yeah, check the oven.
This thing has been beeping in your video?
Yeah, so like I told you guys, I personally think that the rabbit hole is a lot deeper than what a lot of these Democrat operatives would like to admit in regards to the cover-up that happened with Joe Biden. I think that it is very, very, very unlikely that Joe Biden just found out that he had cancer. I feel like Democrats knew this for a long time, especially the people closest to Joe Biden, and that ultimately at the end of the day, these people just didn't want Trump to win, right? They decided to lie to the American people because, again, they didn't want Trump to win. They didn't just lie to the American people. They lied to themselves. And at least some Democrat operatives are admitting that, hey, you know, I just wanted Biden to win. And this is why I really didn't want to come to terms with the reality of Biden's decline.
But one part of this that I do think has not been, and I think I've been reflecting on this too, about, you know, because we went to the White House and saw Joe Biden, who had just come back from a trip, and he was, I don't think it wasn't as I think egregious as what you hear in the audio around the Her report.
This was April of 2024.
It was April, and he was rambling, and he was hard to follow, and he repeated a story. But then we were assured by people around him that he was just exhausted. And then we were at the fundraiser, obviously, the famous Clooney fundraiser. And, you know, I think people inside maybe weren't being honest with themselves about what they were seeing. But I know, like, from my own point of view, part of what was a challenge was because Joe Biden seemed so hell-bent on staying in, right? I never wanted to be dishonest about what I felt we were seeing. And by the way, we were getting shit about talking about Joe Biden not doing enough to overcome the questions around his age long before he dropped out. Like, we were talking about it. We were trying to be honest about it.
Yeah, everybody talks about that this all began after the debate, but I think everybody very clearly was, you know, polls were showing a year before that, people felt that he was not in a position to run for re-election. People were talking about it before then. The debate was kind of the, we're all worried about, you know, a hurricane event, and then the hurricane hit, but people were talking about it.
But I think the point I was going to make about just my own perspective on it was, I remember feeling, I want to talk about this as a huge liability. I want to talk about this as something Joe Biden can overcome. But I'm not going to go so far as to say, I think Joe Biden must drop out. He is too old to be president. A, because I didn't know exactly what was going on behind the scenes. But B, if Joe Biden is the candidate, I want him to fucking win because I care about the country. And I can't, and I don't want to be somebody suddenly having the words we're saying taken out of context and all of a sudden part of the case against Joe Biden from the right that would use any person criticizing Joe Biden from the left as a weapon against him. So it was about being honest about Joe Biden's age as a liability, while knowing that if he is the nominee, I want to be clear that I thought it was important to make sure we did everything we could to reelect him.
Yeah, so there you have it, folks. Former Obama aide and Democrat operative Jon Lovett admitting to Jon Stewart that, yeah, you know, we kind of knew that something was up with Joe Biden, but we just wanted him to win, right? We just didn't want Trump to win. And this is why we were afraid to speak out, right? I think everybody kind of knows that is what essentially happened, right? That is why the cover-up happened, because of the Trump derangement. They said, we would rather have a mindless president, right? An empty suit in office, somebody who's not really running the show, than to have Trump in office, right? This is what Democrats actively decided, okay? Because Joe Biden was not running the country, and I think most people kind of understood that, right? That Joe Biden was not the one in charge, and that everybody around him was basically complicit and responsible for the cover-up, because ultimately at the end of the day, they just wanted more power and control, okay? And with, again, an empty suit in office, you can imagine how much power and control a lot of these Democrats had in the White House, considering how, again, Biden wasn't calling the shots.
Things about this. One is the reason, any doctor who looked at him would have known that he had it for 8 years.
Absolutely.
But they couldn't let a real doctor look at him because a real doctor would say he's got Parkinson's, you got to get him out of it.
100%.
So by not allowing a real doctor to look at him, it just went on and on and on and on. And the other, I think, interesting thing is it was really weird that Biden leapt in and wanted a debate in June. It was because his poll numbers were going down. The Reagan-Carter debate was 1 week before the election. If they had waited and done it then, the media would have had to power through and say, no, his performance was fine. He's great. Never seen him better. He might have won re-election, and today Kamala would be our president.
Anne brings up a really good point because I want to talk about that doctor. You know who that doctor was? Kevin O'Connor. This is a family business associate. He had a financial interest in propping up the Biden regime, and that is a fundamental problem here. People lied about his cognitive decline because they wanted power. Let's be perfectly honest about that. Exactly. Jill Biden, and I will name the names. Jill Biden, Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donnellan, Anita Dunn, Anthony Bernal. These were Jeff Zients. These were the people running our country. We had a council of presidents for the past few years. We didn't have an elected president. We had these unelected hacks who understood that Biden was our final gravy train, that as soon as he went off into the sunset, they were done. So they wanted to drag this on for forever.
Can I jump in on that? Because you mentioned all the unelected people who were involved in the cover-up of Biden's mental decline, which is true. But there are also elected lawmakers who are currently in Congress who also engage in that cover-up. Representative Jim Clyburn, who's supposed to be like a sacred cow in the Democratic Party, knew of Biden's mental decline. It's outlined perfectly in that book, Fight. And basically, on the night of the debate, he got a bunch of invites to watch, like viewing parties for the debate. And he said, no, I don't want to go. He decided to watch the debate alone in case he cried over Biden's poor performance. Yes. How depressing is that?
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Well, yeah, so I got to tell you guys, I am personally rooting for her take, right, to eventually take down The View. Okay, we will see, but I think that is an amazing idea to have women who actually, in my opinion, are somewhat rational, even though, it's like they frame it as, oh, well, these are conservative women. No, they're not conservative women. I believe all those women on that panel are basically liberal, okay? Or in the case of Anna Kasparian, I mean, I think she's still a progressive. But still, I mean, these are somewhat rational women, somewhat sane women. I just think they need an audience, right? If they got an audience, I think that this show could really, really, really take off. So again, I love the idea. I think that Lindy Lee basically dropped some gems here in regards to name dropping some of the people who were involved in the cover-up, right? Who were around Joe Biden, because a lot of people are acting like, well, we didn't know anything. I didn't know anything at all. Okay, again, these people were around Joe Biden all day. I didn't see anything. Okay, and nobody's buying it, right? And this is why you have some of these ex-Biden aides. They're now being called to testify, right? They're being called to testify before Congress and to tell us what they actually knew, because there's no way that these people were around Joe Biden all day and didn't know what was happening. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Lawmakers are demanding answers from President Biden's physician and other former White House officials over what they knew, when they knew it, regarding former President Biden's health issues.
Yeah, senior White House correspondent, the younger Peter Ducey, joins us now with more. Peter.
Good morning. And the small group of staffers that formed a tight circle around Joe Biden for his one and only term all just got letters from the House Oversight Committee to come in and explain what they did or did not do to conceal his decline from the American public. So the following Biden folks, go check your mail. His former physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, the former director of the Domestic Policy Council, Neera Tanden, the former assistant to the president and chief of staff to the First Lady, Anthony Bernal, the former assistant to the president and deputy chief of staff, Annie Tomasini, and the former deputy assistant to the president and director of strategic outreach, Ashley Williams.
They're behind the scenes. They fly under the radar. These are the unelected bureaucrats that we believe had an overwhelming influence over Joe Biden and could have possibly been serving as de facto presidents of the United States.
Well, now one of the most legendary Democratic thinkers of the last century believes that nothing coming out this week should be that big of a surprise because the American people told pollsters it was a problem 2 years ago.
I think that Jake and those book, I mean, it was a good book, but to me it was a water's wet book. Like I said, 80% of the country. I'll never forget, in May of 2023, to be exact, I saw a Washington Post ABC poll, and I went, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And it never changed.
I asked Caroline Lovett if President Trump has followed up yet with folks that work in the offices here or that work in the residence to find some kind of files or some kind of backup to all of these Republican assertions that there were these de facto presidents, and she said that he has not yet. Back to you.
All right, Peter.
Thank
The
you,
scandal
Peter.
continues. I think this is the right move. It needs to happen. It's important. We need to figure out who was running the White House.
Yeah.
When did they know the president was in decline? Everybody needs to be sworn under oath. And people should lose their jobs, the next job they want. They shouldn't be hired as analysts. They shouldn't be hired at these big consulting firms or defense contracting jobs as well. They concealed the president's health. And honestly, the more and more we're learning from the book, it is clear no one told Joe Biden that he had lost a step. That's normal. That is normal in some point in time for someone to be in denial of their health situation when they have dementia or any type of cognitive decline. But it's up to the family and the people that surround the person to let them know. No one told the president.
Well, here's the thing about that. I don't think that Biden wanted to accept the reality of his declining mental and physical condition. So I don't necessarily think it was easy for Biden's aides to have a real talk conversation with him and to say directly to Joe Biden that, hey, you don't have the juice anymore, that you need to drop out, and that it's not good for us to continue to hide the fact that you are mentally and physically declining, right? I don't think that these aides really wanted to have that real conversation, and the reason why is because at that point, again, they would lose power and control, right? Again, having Joe Biden in the White House meant that they could make decisions without any real accountability, right? Nobody is really supervising them because the president is not aware. And see, some people ask, well, why is this a big deal? Why do people continue to talk about this? Well, the reason why people continue to talk about it is because the Democrat Party and the mainstream liberal media as well, too, because they were complicit, have lost all of their credibility, okay? And this is part of the reason why you're seeing President Trump take the voters that used to be Democrat Party voters and bring them into the Trump coalition because of the fact that the Democrat Party does not have credibility with the American people anymore. In fact, the Democrat operatives are now coping over the reality that President Trump is continuing to do well with some of the same people that Democrats used to win in elections. And basically the path forward for Democrats does not look good at all.
The main story of this is that Democrats are in a huge bit of trouble. Like this, it's just, there's no way to look at this without recognizing the massive scale of our problems. And you can kind of tell yourself that things might be kind of okay by looking at just the shift from 20 to 24. But if you really want to assess where we are as a party, you have to look at the shift from 2016 to 2024. And this is particularly true with Latino voters. Okay. In
2012. 2012 to
even with Latino voters, actually, is the one group where Hillary Clinton
did better.
Did better than Obama.
Yeah.
She 2 points better. But so in 2016, Hillary Clinton won 70% of Latino vote. Kamala Harris won 54%. It's a 16-point drop. And then you would like to think that gender, that this is all about men. It's not all about men. Latinas moved 17 points in 8 years. Latino men went 14 points in 8 years. There is no path to the Latinos are the fastest growing population in the country. They are particularly politically powerful because of how the population is distributed in electoral rich Sunbelt states like Texas, Florida, Arizona, Nevada, etc. And so they're becoming more of the electorate, and we are losing more of them at a very fast rate. Like, if that trend continues, there is no path to Democrats winning elections. And so we have to take that. Everyone was telling themselves stories about that maybe 2020 was an aberration because Trump made gains there because of COVID. Like, there's big talk about COVID. This is something bigger than that, and we have to address that.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that, okay? Democrats are losing their coalition. And again, I think part of the reason why is because they continue to gaslight themselves and to gaslight the American people. I think a lot of people, again, they're talking about Hispanics there, but particularly, everybody really, they're seeing through the antics of the Democrat Party and their major trust issues with them, okay? And until Democrats acknowledge the truth about what happened, I think they're going to continue to struggle. But I do think that this hearing is important. I think that talking to these Biden aides and figuring out who's running the country is important. Talking to Biden's doctor and figuring out how in the hell did he miss Joe Biden having prostate cancer, because he certainly had it while he was in the White House. And who was using the auto pen, right? Who was signing these pardons and the executive orders and all the paperwork that the president has to sign? Who was actually doing these things? Was it Biden? Was he aware of what he was signing? right? Who is running the country? That's what we need to know. We need to know who is running the country. There are a lot more questions than answers. And as long as Democrats continue to play this game, right, where they don't want to tell the American people the truth, they're going to continue to lose voters, right? They're going to continue to lose voters. We're seeing it happen right now. And yeah, like that dude said, you know, I really don't see a path to victory for the Democrat Party. I really think that this scandal may be it for them. And I told you guys, if Democrats don't win before 2030, it is over, right? It's actually over for the Democrat Party, okay? Because once the new census comes in, and all of the people who have basically left these blue states and they went to red states, once that's counted, once we get rid of all these illegals, yeah, I mean, Democrats, they're going to lose some seats, okay? And they're going to lose power. And again, it's going to be really hard for them to win elections moving forward into the future unless they turn it around quickly. And again, the first thing they have to do if they want to turn it around is to actually tell the truth about what happened during Biden's presidency. But as long as they continue to gaslight, then hey, they're not going to move anywhere, right? They're not going to go anywhere. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.